Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Zeppelin Attack from Evil Hat Productions. This is a deck-building card game, I guess all deck builders are card games, that takes place in the Spirit of the Century RPG universe, also from Evil Hat. Now, full disclosure up front, I've never played the Spirit of the Century RPG, so there is my bias or lack of bias up front, but I know a little bit about it. It's a very pulpy, almost steampunky type theme to it, and hence this game where you are in Zeppelins attacking each other, and actually each player in this game takes control of like an evil person, like a mastermind in this Spirit of the Century universe who's trying to attack the other evil people with Zeppelins. And when I say evil people, there's like a woman named Jacqueline Frost who looks kind of like the White Queen from the X-Men. There's an evil gorilla guy. There's a dude that's just a brain in a jar. And you all have these armadas of Zeppelins and even your own personal special Zeppelin, experimental and flagship Zeppelins that you are attacking each other with. And like I said, it's a deck building game. So you're doing all this while buying cards, taking new cards into your deck, and just trying to have the most points by the end of the game, which is going to happen when, I think it's, if I remember, it's 3 decks of the buyable cards run out. So, is this game for you? Is it going to scratch the right deck building itch or the thematic itch of this pulp steampunk type world? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at how the game plays. Then we're going to come back and give you my final opinion. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Zeppelin Attack. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players that takes place in the Spirit of the Century universe, which is sort of a pulp steampunk type world. The goal of the game is to have the most points by the end of the game, which is whenever 3 decks of the mercenary cards run out. These experimental Zeppelins, which I'll get to in a moment, don't really have any impact on whether the game ends or not. Once one player takes the last card from one of these stacks, every other player gets one more turn, then the game is over and you count your points. The main mechanic of this game is deck building. Every player is going to start off with their own flagship card and their own personal deck of starting cards, which you are then going to use from turn to turn to buy new and better cards, and also to attack the other players with your armada of Zeppelins. So let's go ahead and start with that. So each player is going to have a different character that they start as. In this case, I have the Forebrain, who's like a brain in a jar. I guess all of your characters in this one are actually kind of like villains or like bad guys, like wacky caricatures of bad guys. And all the cards have the same special ability, which is to say that if your flagship is attacked by another player, you get to draw a card right away before you defend. And I'll get to what that all means in a minute. Now, every Zeppelin in this game has 3 different stats. Well, they may not have all 3. Some of them only have attack and defense. Some of them only have defense in the yellow one, which is operations. But they all have at least a couple of different stats. These are your capacity. Almost every other card in the game is an action card, which you're going to have to play. If you want to use it, you have to play it onto one of your airships. So, for instance, the top card of one of these mercenary decks here, these are the cards that you can buy during the course of the game, is an operative that has this number here, which is a 3. That means that you have to put this onto a Zeppelin that has at least a capacity of 3 or greater. Now, if you try to put that on your flagship and you don't meet the right capacity level, you just can't do it. It's an illegal move because nothing can ever happen to your flagship. But if you try to put it on a card that does at least have some operations power, but not quite enough. So, for instance, this Der Tesseract card here has an operations level of 1. Well, that operative that I showed you has an operations level of 3. I can do that if I previously played that Zeppelin, but that's going to make that Zeppelin go away at the end of the round. Typically, when you draw one of your Zeppelins on your turn, you just simply put it into play and build out your armada, and they stick around. But if you go over capacity, you get to do the effect, but that's going to go away at the end of the turn. But let's take a quick step back and look at some of the starting cards that we have in our deck. Everyone's got essentially the same deck. There are some differences, but you have defense cards, Zeppelin cards, operations cards, and attack cards, which are also the same types of cards that you can purchase out here. These are all called mercenary cards. So, for instance, here's a defense card, and we'll take a look at that. As you can see, here's a defense rating, which you have to match against the capacity of one of your Zeppelins. And defense cards are going to be played out of... You can play them on your turn to get some of the effects, but to do what they're meant to do, which is defend, you play it out of turn when someone attacks you. Now, every attack card and every defense card has symbols related to it. Some of the more powerful cards have multiple symbols. So, for instance, this defense card defends against... This is the psychic symbol, and you also have it up here, psionic. So you also have that written up here as well. And some attacks and some defenses can either inflict or prevent multiple types of damage. So you have defense, you have all these different types, and it tells you this is for the starting deck of the Walking Mind. Now, it also has an ability here with the shield that says, in green, that says you may draw one card. You only get this ability if you successfully defend with this card, so that happens right away. Some other types of cards might have other text with a circle, and let's see, I'll show you an example, like this attack card here. A circle and in black text. This means that regardless of whether or not your attack was successful for this attack card, you still get to do this ability. So this is an example of an attack card, and again, it's the same kind of thing, except you're using this on your turn to attack another player, which is very simply put it on a Zeppelin that can handle it with the capacity, and then boom, pick a Zeppelin that someone else has, you target it and try to attack, they get to play a defense card if they have it, but this one they need to prevent that with an electrical defense, which is what that symbol signifies there. You have Zeppelins in your deck, the same as the mercenary ships that you have the capacity to buy. Operation Zeppelins only have defense and operative capability. And remember that if you draw these, you start off with a hand of 5 cards, and you always draw back up to 5 and discard what you want to discard at the end of your turn, which is a little bit different from other deck builders. And if you end up with one of these in the start of your hand, during your action phase, you can just play as many as you want down next to your flagship, like I said before. Here's an example of an attack Zeppelin, so you have an attack rating instead. I'll show you some of the operatives. So the midshipman here has a 1 capacity. When you play him, you may draw 2 fate cards and add the lowest to your discard pile, whereas Resourceful number 2 says you may draw 3 fate cards and add the lowest to your hand. So let's talk about those fate cards. Now, everyone's going to start off with a 4 and 3 fate point card, and they're a minor, mission, and major plot. Both of them have the same effect. When you play it, you're going to get the fate points and immediately put them into the discard pile, which means they're gone from your deck. But this is the currency of the game. Every deck builder has a currency. This one is fate points. Every mercenary card that's out here and the experimental Zeppelins has a fate point cost up in the top corner. So the flurry of activity here has the attack card has defense card has a 5 fate point cost. During the second phase of your turn, after the action phase, when you're playing cards down on your Zeppelins, you're going to have the opportunity to buy as many cards as you could theoretically afford, although it's very difficult to buy more than one card. So you simply use your fate cards, put them into the discard pile, usually, and then you'll take the card into your hand, not your deck. That's another way that this is a little bit different than most deck builders. It immediately goes to your hand instead of into your discard pile, but then at the end of your turn, you may discard it if you want to. But because they're playing in different phases, you don't get to use it right away. You've already gone through your action phase. So when cards like those 2 operatives that I showed you, the Resourceful number 2 and the other operative, the midshipman, when they let you, that's how you're going to get more fate cards. Through cards like that, they'll let you sift through the deck, get some low cards. Some of the fate cards actually have special abilities when they're acquired or when they pop up. So for instance, Benjamin Hugh discovers Atlantis. It's a 3 fate point card, but when this card is acquired by anyone, all players draw a card. And then you return this card to the fate card pile when spent, which is pretty much what every fate card does at some point. Another example would be Max Silver finds an entrance to the Hollow Earth. It doesn't make any sense to me, but sure. When this card is acquired, all players take a Zeppelin from their discard pile and add it to their armada. Immediately show you one more here. Jet Black raids the hidden aerodrome. When this card is acquired, all players must discard a Zeppelin from their armadas. But that is a 5 fate point card, by the way, which is the most expensive one you can get. So that is the kind of weird way the currency works in this game. You're going to gain it, but then you're going to lose it. But hopefully you're able to lose it and also gain a really great card into your deck. And every card is worth victory points. Some of them, the ones that are cheap are usually, or really, some of them might have decent ability, but might only be worth 1 victory point. Some of the better Zeppelins are worth 4 victory points. And all of the experimental Zeppelins are worth a lot of points. They're all worth 6 points, but they are 10 fate points to acquire. These are all a little bit better and different than the other cards that you gain or start with during the game. So, for instance, the Chimpanzee here, which is the Gorilla Khan's ship, only has operations and defense, but when you play an operative card on the Zeppelin, you immediately acquire a fate card to your hand. Can only be bought by Gorilla Khan. I'll show you another one. Das Kraftwerk. If you attack successfully with the Zeppelin, you take an extra battle point. So that's one thing I didn't mention, is that when you attack someone, so you throw down an attack card on one of your Zeppelins that can handle it. So let's say I attack with my shock rockets from my flagship. someone else that I'm attacking, their particular Zeppelin, has a chance to defend. But if I'm successful, if it's a regular Zeppelin that they have, it goes away. It goes in their discard pile. If it's their flagship, nothing happens to their flagship ever. But I also get to take one of the cards from any of the 5 mercenary decks that's still in the game, at least. And it doesn't matter what the card is, I just take it, shove it underneath my flagship card, and that is a point for the end of the game. So getting points via attacking is a viable strategy as opposed to buying cards, which you may not be able to do sometimes, in order to get points. Now, there's also another way to get points in the game, and that is by having the most fate cards still in your deck at the end. If you're able to do that, I believe that it is 3 points. Yes, it's 3 points, unless you're in a tie, in which case the tied players all get 1 point instead. And really, that's the game. I kind of glossed over a few tiny things, but really you're just trying to acquire the best cards that you can, using the cards that you have to get fate cards to get those awesome cards, and then attacking the other players when the opportunity presents itself, hoping they don't have the right defense card to block what you're trying to do, knock out their ships, set them back, and generally be the best damn mad scientist Zeppelin person you can be. Let's get to my final thoughts. Presentation-wise, I think that Zeppelin Attack does a great job. I love the artwork. I think it's really, really good. I don't necessarily always like the pulp comic steampunk feel that a lot of games have, but I think it works really well here. The graphic design is really well laid out, very simple, very easy to understand, and everything just looks good. And while it's not the most thematic game ever, which is less of a fault of this game and just of deck building in general, it's hard for deck builders to be thematic without adding like a ton of extra mechanics, like in a game like Legendary, for example. But I think that they do an admirable job in Zeppelin Attack, because it does feel really cool how you have a fleet of ships and you're attacking the other players and you're defending and you're putting crew members down on each of the ships, which is a nice little thematic thing. So of course one person's in command and then you only get to do one thing. That makes sense to me thematically. So again, presentation-wise, I think the Zeppelin Attack really does a good job there. Mechanically speaking, the game leaves me wanting. Now, there are some things going on in this game, like I said, that are really innovative and cool. I do like how you're attacking each other and defending. This is something that I really enjoyed in Star Realms as well, another game that came out this year, because I do think that some deck builders, while it's a genre and a mechanic that I love, can feel like solitaire games. Of course, that's one of the main complaints about it. But when you add layers of interaction, I think that's great, and I think the Zeppelin Attack does a favorable job with that, but how it's handled is a bit weird and wonky. Because really what it is it's taking the randomness to a level that no one I played it with was really quite comfortable with. Because what it really boils down to is you can field a huge armada of ships on your turn, right? You can just play a lot of Zeppelins and feel like, all right, I got this awesome army and all these things I can do, but let's say it's a 4-player game. You now have 3 other people who are going to be smashing you with their attack cards. And if you're not lucky enough to have drawn not just defense cards in general, but the right defense cards, your whole big mighty armada you just put down, it's just going to get obliterated. And you're going to be left with not much to do on your turn. And remember that, as I said in the overview, what battles come down to is not, okay, I've got the strongest ship and I've got the highest totals and I've equipped it and upgraded it and all these things. No, what it really comes down to is this attack does this type of damage, and guess what? You don't have the right defense card that blocks against that type of damage, so that's just gone. It's just gone. And in fact, having a bigger, stronger armada of ships is a detriment most of the time, because that makes you a ripe plum. This is my new favorite phrase, but it makes you a ripe, juicy plum for all the other players to attack, because attacking someone's flagship is not that smart a move, because they get to draw a card, and I'm going to get back to that in a second, by the way. But just being able to draw a card makes it less likely you're going to be able to defeat it. And by the way, it doesn't go anywhere. You get the point from the tops of one of the decks, which is a cool thing. I do like that. But it doesn't go anywhere. So attacking the flagship, not really in your best interest. But if you wait until someone puts out a lot of measly little ships, well, awesome. I'll just destroy those. Not only are they easier to take out, but now I'm seriously crippling you and I'm getting points? Psh, that's boss. I'll do that all day long. So it's like almost like the game encourages you to not do that unless you absolutely know that you have awesome defense cards in your hand. But guess what? If your hand is weighed down with a lot of defense cards, you're not going to be buying anything, which means that even though you might be gaining a few points, maybe 1, maybe 2 points from your turn from attacking, if you have enough ships and attack cards, you're not going to be buying, that's only 1 point. And you're not going to be getting cards that might be worth 2 or 3 points each by just buying them with the fate cards. And that is probably my personal biggest gripe I have about the game, is that the thing I love about deck building games is that is the escalation of your economic engine, whatever that might be for whatever particular game it is, whether it's power or runes or coins or whatever, in this case fate, getting that engine going and buying awesome cards and then doing whatever with them. Attacking other players, sure, great, that's fine, but you need to be able to buy these awesome cards that come out. When I saw a card come out in Zeppelin Attack that was like 9 fate and had like a wicked ability, I'm like, oh, I want that so bad. Never going to happen, because I just did not ever happen to have the right fate cards at the right time, and your fate cards go away. Now, when I first encountered that mechanic and read it up on it before we started playing the game, I was like, wow, that's kind of neat, actually. The money just goes away, and sometimes they have special effects. That's an interesting thing. I've never seen that in the game before. I think there's a reason I didn't see it in the game before, because while it's kind of cool at first, part of the strategy of a deck building game is, do you weigh yourself down with too much money in the hopes of getting these better cards? But at least if you have that money, again, you're going to be buying some cool stuff, but you never get the best of either of those worlds. You know, you're either very lucky and draw the very few amount of fate cards that you have in your deck right away and get something awesome, and then they go away and you're starting all over again, or you don't get lucky and you are buying nothing, or you're buying the weakest card out there because of the very minuscule amount of fate that you have. And the only way to call this is the weird thing about it too. The only way to call cards from your deck or from your hand is by purging them, they call them in this game, is by buying awesome stuff from the row, and then you get to get rid of a card. Well, that's actually a great mechanic, but it doesn't happen. It very rarely happens. So I never felt like I was building up to anything in this game. Even in one of the games we played where I won and I did very well, it wasn't really that I did that well. It's just that I was the least poor of doing things, because no one was really getting a lot of points, because no one was buying many cards, and it was only from attacking people, which again is pure random luck. I just happened to do that a little bit better than the other people, so it was a very unsatisfying thing for me. I'll also say that, again, I've said this many times, I love it when any game makes every player distinct and gives them something unique. So when I first saw in the game that everyone was a different character with their own starting deck and their own flagship, I'm like, wow, that's so cool, I love it. And different art and everything. But all the flagships are exactly the same. Your experimental ships are different, but again, they're really expensive. And every game I played, like one person was able to afford their experimental ship. So that's a weird thing. And all the rest of your cards in your deck, like the symbols change a bit. There's a few minuscule differences, but they're essentially the same starting deck. So that was pretty disappointing to me too. I like the idea of the fate cards. I like that some of them have special abilities on them. I will say that. And I do like the idea of, again, putting crew members down and being limited in the actions that you have by the number of Zeppelins, but it is such a drawback to actually play a lot of the other types of Zeppelins that you have that, man, it just doesn't feel like you're accomplishing much in the game. I think that would be the number one thing I would say about this game, is that I never felt like I was really accomplishing what I was trying to do, like in deck builders. I didn't feel like I had an engine going. I didn't feel like I just had this awesome war party of Zeppelins going on. I just felt like, oh man, I really, really hope I can have this ship survive through the turn. That's all I ever felt. I hope that they hit me with an attack that I actually have a card for. Or I had the feeling of, oh man, I have nothing but attack and defense cards. I'm not buying anything again. So I'm really sorry to say that, because I really had high hopes for this game. I love deck building games in general. I love the artwork on this one. I even was coming around on the theme, even having not played the RPG. And there's kernels of really great ideas here, but I think that someone that I played with really said it best. Without knowing anything about the game, he said, was this a Kickstarter game? Because it really feels like it wasn't play tested enough. I'm not going to make an assumption. I've gotten in trouble for that recently. I'm not going to make the assumption that that's the case, but I definitely feel like it didn't account for the fact that it's an okay game. It's not a very good deck building game. I never got that awesome feeling of building up your deck, which is the feeling that I love and why I like that genre of games so much. So for me, this is a pass. Your mileage might vary depending on how much you love the theme and the spirit of the Century RPG. If you have played it and enjoyed it, but for me, there's just a lot of other deck builders that do what this sets out to do better. For instance, Star Realms and other games of its ilk. So Zeppelin Attack, can't really recommend it, but it's not a terrible game, but it's just okay. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.